and Form 4 learners going back to school. And there has been a lot of discussion and conversation around the impact of COVID-19 on the education sector. And miles and acres of coverage has been undertaken on its impact, how it has affected the sector, and that kind of thing. A significant population of learners in our schools at different levels is the learners with disabilities and other special needs. Like I already said, this could be up to 15% of the total population that we have, for instance, at the basic education level, which is up to Form 4, secondary. And in this country, we have more than 13 million learners in our institutions of basic education. And that means we are easily talking of anything between 1.3 million to almost 2 million learners that we have in our schools. These are learners with the different disabilities and other special needs in education that may not necessarily present as disabilities. But we realize that the country, even as it goes on with different conversations around the impact of COVID-19 in the education sector, this population doesn't get the mention that it deserves. Therefore, to a great extent, this population has been omitted from the general conversation and initiatives that are focusing on learners at different levels. So it is true that in this country, people are not very well, many people are not very well aware of this particular population, what their needs are, and how to address whatever situation that they find themselves in, especially as brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, it will be very helpful to know from different people really their perspectives on how the COVID-19 has affected these learners with regards to education services, and especially how different initiatives can be used to intervene and mitigate some of the effects of COVID-19. Because as Ministry of Education, it is our constitutional mandate to ensure that all learners in this country access education. Actually, the Constitution goes ahead and pronounces itself on basic education in the Bill of Rights as being free and compulsory. Not just to a few children or a few learners, but to all the learners that we have in this country. Of course, that includes those learners with special needs and specifically other disabilities. There are several policies that support that constitutional provision, starting from legislation in the Basic Education Act that recognizes that indeed this is a population that definitely require education services, and therefore the ministry and all stakeholders need to provide interventions that ensure that children or learners with disabilities and other special needs access education at all levels. So when schools were closed, and I believe this is something that we will get to hear from other participants, it would be interesting to know how these children and learners fared, what the effect was, and what can be done really to make sure that whatever effect that they went through, whatever experience that they went through can be mitigated so that it does not adversely affect their access to education services in this country. Continuing with policies, I have to mention the sector policy for learners and trainees with disabilities as one critical policy document that addresses itself to the situation of the learners that we are talking about today. These are learners who have a right to access not just specific education services, but also those support services that are required to ensure that the learners are able to access quality, relevant education in the different institutions therein. This group of learners are found in different sorts of institutions. We still have those who go to special schools. We have those who go to integrated programs. These are more or less regular schools, but the learners are incorporated in the different schools so that they're learning alongside the different learners without disabilities. But we also have those who go to special units. These special units are classrooms that are found in regular schools with specially trained teachers, and the teachers give the learners the basic skills that they require sometimes before they are integrated into the regular classrooms to learn alongside the learners without disability. But the policy that I mentioned, that is the sector policy for learners and trainees with disabilities, gives a new policy thrust towards the provision of education services, and that is inclusive education. It basically says that these learners that we are talking about today, as much as possible, and if they are able to, can access whichever institution of their choice that is close to them, as long as those institutions are able to support meaningful learning. So it's not just about placing a child in a classroom, but placing the child in that classroom, but ensuring that the support services, the teachers, the learning material, and resources, the environment is all friendly and has been adapted so that this child is able to be included in that school community. These are the learners that we are talking about, and I believe we are going to have a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fred Haga, the Director of the Directorate of Special Needs Education in the Ministry of Education, for framing this. I think one thing that has caught me here said is that there is a missing population who have even been missing in the conversation. And how can they be included, especially in moments like this when the education system has been tried? As I welcome Dr. John Mugo, who will be moderating, I'd like to say thank you to the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development for beginning the policy dialogues, I think it was last month, when they hosted the first discussions in which they were looking at it from an insider point of view of how the remote learning that was offered fared and what more could have been done. If we had another moment, they would have told us that some of the things and suggestions that came are already being actioned. And I say this so that we do not feel that this is just a conversation. It actually has low-hanging fruits that we are going to take so that we do something about them. I'd also like at this point to recognize the Include platform, who shared with us the idea of having policy dialogues, and which we have owned as our own, as we use this as an opportunity to move forward the discussions and dialogue in this country. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Mugo, who will be moderating a very eminent crew of speakers that we have today. And John Mugo has, I think, a history in special needs and is the current chairperson of the Kenya Institute of Special Education, KICD. And I do not know if he says this a lot, but John also studied music. And so he sings a lot. In another time, he can probably sing for you. And, but other than that, served as the head of Department of Special Needs Education, managed the Uwezo learning process, and is now doing so many things in his current space, which we will not talk about today. John, you have about 30 minutes to manage the discussion, and then another, I hope, 30 or so minutes, or maybe 20 minutes to manage the question and answer that will come. Over to you, John.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to see this family of inclusion and special needs education coming together again, organizing ourselves. I see in the meeting people like CTNA must be connecting from Kapsabet or somewhere, who heads the Association of Special Needs Educators, and many other good friends, even from my former employer, Kenyatta University. This question on what happened to children over this COVID period, those children with special needs, is a very pertinent question. And as KICD, we were awake to this fact, and we held even several webinars and even conducted a survey to inform ourselves. And I'm glad that Lydia is here to take us through all that. It is to acknowledge the effort that each one of us may have made at a personal level. I know Susan Thu and others were also doing stuff around the learning of deaf children, and so many other efforts that really each one of us contributed. This discussion could not be without our three panelists, and it is my pleasure now to introduce Lydia Chege. Lydia is a senior manager in charge of research assessment and partnership at the Kenya Institute of Special Education. She's an initiative-driven leader with a record of accomplishment of performance, turnaround, and operations management. Lydia is passionate about research and has helped to steer the Institute's research mandate, therefore turning KICD into a recognized disability and special needs education research hub. Lydia is also a professional teacher and counselor. Lydia is here specifically to share with us findings from that survey that she led, but also the other initiatives of the webinars that KICD hosted and what we know about children with special needs during COVID. It is my pleasure to introduce Frances Anyenda. Frances is the Chief Public Relations and Communications Officer at the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, responsible for coordinating public communication at the National Council. And he's also in charge of organizing and observance of the various national and international events and days of persons with disabilities in partnership with stakeholders in the disability sector. Frances has worked as a public communications officer in various organizations in both public and private sector. Karibu sana, Frances. And we have also Sylvia Mochabo. Sylvia, who is the founder of Anbe Speaks for Special Needs Persons Foundation. It is called the Action Network for the Disabled, which is also a national disabled organization working at all levels of the community with the involvement of persons with disabilities to bring about positive change. Sylvia has 10 years experience as a special needs parent and has advocated for policy change and inclusion of persons with neurodevelopmental disabilities. She is the reigning Miss Africa, United Nations, and Miss Elite Face of Africa 20. Discussion from each of you to just walk us through the key questions and aspects that you have prepared. So Lydia, karibu sana. I take your 8 minutes to walk us through, and remember to end up with 2 to 3 recommendations on what we should do moving forward. Over to you, Lydia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mugo, my chairman, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to share the screen. So I have purposely called my presentation Status of Learners with Disabilities During School Close Down. And I have used the term school on purpose. The schools closed down, but learning did not close down. And therefore, I'm looking at school as just an infrastructure, a reporting point where the children gather and they are taught by their respective teachers. So we have worked around status of learners with disabilities at the point where schools closed down. And what happened to these children when schools closed down? I'll give a brief background and say that the National Economic Survey of 2019, that is just last year, from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, indicate that most households with persons with disability live in poverty with limited ability to finance school-related expenditure. I think they focus more from our study. We realized that they focus more on sustainability of life. Their life is more around maybe food and medical related services. And therefore education then does not become priority number one when you think about children. Sometimes it is not even priority number two.
Si kitu ambayo inawasumbua sana kwa sababu wao wana
what we call the Maslow hierarchy of needs. To a family with a child with a disability, education does not rank very highly. And it is not because they don't value education. I would say it's because of two reasons. There is the issue of funding, but there is also the issue of how does society respond to especially children with a disability. As Director Haga has said, most of the time, this is a population that is omitted from daily conversations. And when we started having daily conversations around COVID-19, even the interpretation services came much later after the conversations had started. In the year 2018, Kenya Institute of Special Education did release a finding from the National Survey on Children with Disabilities aged between the age of 1 and 21 years. We went to 21 years because we are cognizant of the fact that children with disabilities sometimes will delay either entry into school or transition from one level to another one. And from this particular study, 11.4% of children in this country were children with disabilities. I would like you to calculate very fast, for those who are good with numbers, what 11.4% would be for the 10 million of learners that we have in this country. It is really a sizable group of children that we need to be having conversation around. Having said that, I am still appreciative of the fact that we have the Kenya Basic Education COVID-19 Emergency Response Plan that was rolled out by the Ministry of Education this year as a response to schools have closed down, learners are at home, what happens to education? And government, through this emergency response plan, decided to have remote learning. And this remote learning came, the most known is through the KICD clouds. But we also had other platforms. For example, there were STEM classes that were being run between the Ministry of Education, Semester, and I know the Office of the President. So, and when you look at the number of students who were enrolled in the STEM project, we were told that they were heading to around 10,000 secondary school students taking STEM subjects. But having this kind of a background, then we ask, but what has been the participation in the continued learning process by children with special needs in this country. I think that is why we're having...
You have 4 minutes.
I think that is why we have this dialogue this morning. And we're saying schools closed. Then what happened? From the study that we carried out, 65% of teachers reported that COVID-19 had negatively affected the health, you can see what comes first, and education of children with disabilities and special needs in education to a great extent. When we try to reach out to teachers and understand who are the teachers who are doing a follow-up on their learners, we found that a majority of the teachers that did a follow-up on their learners were pre-primary school teachers. These were the children that were in ECD and class 1 and 2. But merely 56% of teachers in primary school, the regular primary school, did a follow-up on the children. And 78% of teachers in secondary school did a follow-up on their learners through WhatsApp and other platforms. Teachers reported a great expectation from parents, ranging from food, subsistence support, COVID-related safety training for their children, access to medicine and therapy, and learning ranked last among these requests. The majority of the children, that is 76.1%, were not able to participate in remote learning owing to not having the digital devices and access to internet. And actually those learners that had digital devices at school said that they left the devices back at school. The programs that were being broadcasted had not been adapted to suit disabilities. Some of the parents indicated that they were not aware of these programs. Then there was lack of skilled personnel to assist the parents to access these particular programs, even using the gadgets that they had. There's definitely lack of power connectivity in especially most of the rural setup, because power connectivity was only connected up to the school, but not up to the home. The program on STEM had no adaptations and it had no accommodation. So what are the necessary infrastructure if we were to move forward? Adaptation, modification, and monitoring of programs in such a way that we incorporate classroom teachers, especially for the blind, for the deaf, and for those children with neurodevelopmental disabilities. Provide more gadgets for remote learning, like Orbit readers for the blind learners, and tablets for the other children. Improve on connectivity, especially to promote inclusive education, and also a continued digital learning even after schools resume. Let us continue with this practice so that we build capacity. What are my recommendations? These are the recommendations that we give from Kenya Institute of Special Education according to the study that we carried out. That we need to build capacity for all teachers in universal designs of learning, UDL. We need to enhance teacher competence in the use of ICT for purposes of continued remote learning, and highly consider an immediate reopening of special schools and units for purpose of learning, provision of related health services, especially medicine and therapy. And I'm sure my colleague parent, Sylvia, will talk more about this. And also as a safety net for abused and abandoned children with a disability, because we did find a lot of children who had now again gone back to being locked at home, or they were left to wander on the street. Actually, it prompted some of the schools to become safety nets and start small homes for these children. We also need to purpose to bring back the institution of education, assessment, and resource centers. Dr. Mugo, I rest my case. Thank you
so much, Lydia. I think this has been pretty insightful in terms of especially what we need to think about. That aspect of ownership of gadgets, for instance, I think is something to highlight. Must gadgets belong to schools? That whenever children close school, learning is discontinued. And not just learning, but also other support that is supported, is offered through technology, plus all the other recommendations. I hope participants, you are posting your questions on the chat platform and Q&A. But also, if you have anything, please note it, because we'll be coming to a discussion after this. Francis, I wish to hand over to you to now bring in the perspectives from the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. Over to you, Francis. You have about 8 minutes.
Thank you, John, and the rest of the panelists and participants. Good morning. I'll begin by giving an overview of what the Council does, so that we're able to see the link between our activities and programs and how we support persons with disabilities in general. As you might be aware, the Council is a government institution.
Sorry, Francis. Sorry, Francis. If you can bend your screen just a bit, we can't see your face. We can only see your. Oh, yeah, much better. Yeah.
Am I clear now?
There you are. There you are. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying, the Council is a government institution that was established in 2003 through an act of Parliament. And basically, the Council has the responsibility or the mandate of promoting inclusion of persons with disabilities in all sectors, and more importantly, also promoting mainstreaming of disability in various sectors of development of this country. And to do this, the Council implements a number of programs. One of them, which is critical, and is the registration of persons with disabilities. We have a mandate of ensuring that all persons with disabilities in this country are registered, and we have a database. As at now, we are meant to register about 700,000 persons with disabilities, all types of disabilities, and including all ages, age brackets. We also, under that registration, besides that, the Council also provides assistive devices and services to the public through provision of various assistive devices, which includes the crutches, the various walking aids, hearing aids, and so on, and also providing training services or providing opportunities for the public to be able to be trained in basic sign language, with the aim of ensuring that the public can be able to communicate to the deaf people. The Council also has a program on LPO financing, in which businesses owned by persons with disabilities, we provide them with what we call LPO financing. They are able to, if they have got tenders to supply, then we're able to provide them with funding of up to £500,000 shillings that can enable them service their tenders with various organizations and agencies. We also have a program called Economic Empowerment. Under this program, we provide support to groups of persons with disabilities to engage, so that they're able to engage in economic activities or income generating activities that are able to improve their income and also enhance their livelihoods. The Council also has a program for persons with albinism, in which every year we are able to support persons with albinism with sunscreen lotion. They are able to collect the sunscreen lotions in our various government institutions. We also support them with, we do cancer screening. So those ones who are found to have cancer, skin cancer, we're able to support them to get treatment in government hospitals. And this greatly helps in reducing the deaths of persons with albinism through skin cancer. The Council also has a program of supporting organizations that are engaged in advocacy work. We provide funding under what we call advocacy and awareness creation support. And we are able to, through this, we're able to give organizations and institutions that are for persons with disabilities to do advocacy work in various counties in the country. Besides that,
Francis, you have 4 minutes. I advise you pace up a little bit now to the issue of learning during COVID.
The other program that I need to mention before I go to what we are discussing today is the issue of support education grants. We provide bursaries to learners in all categories or types of, in all institutions of learning, both from primary to the university. Now, I want to say this, that you know, the coming of COVID-19 was, it took most of us by surprise. One is that it provided some new territory that most of us were able to have challenges in terms of how do we engage. And as a council, we supported a number of persons with disabilities to go through these COVID-19 effects. And one of the things that we did during this particular period was we were able to give cash transfer to persons with disabilities, totally to about 33,000 people were able to receive, each person was receiving 6,000 shillings as a way of cushioning them against the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, in terms of support to learning, I think, as I said, it was a challenge to most of us in terms of how do we now react. But as a council, what we did is that we felt that the easiest way of doing this, then we decided that when the schools, when the universities were opening, especially the university and tertiary institute that opened last month, a while ago, we were able to pay fees for all of those who had applied. And these were 76 people for college institutions and 92 were for university students. And we were able to say that because of this, then we were able to pay for them their school, so they were able to continue with their learning. Now, in terms of responding to the challenges, more specifically for those learners who are at home, what we did mostly is to work with some organizations in terms of awareness creation. But in terms of support, we are planning to provide this coming financial, the next year in January. We are having a program that we are partnering with Kilimanjaro Blind Trust, and we want to provide 100 Orbit readers to learners with visual impairment so that they're able to continue their learning. Now, having said this, I think, as I said, that it was a challenge for us, and we're saying that going forward, we will need to think about how do we re-engineer our program so that we're able to respond to the specific needs that have been brought about by such challenges like the COVID-19 and any other calamities that might be able to emerge, because this is something that we need to work on going forward. The other thing that I want to say is that as a council, we feel that there's now need for us to think of how best can we work with partners in terms of strengthening partnership and enhancing a multi-stakeholder approach towards addressing the issues facing learners with disabilities so that they're able to access education. And lastly, we are saying that we shall continue working with the institutions, especially those that are in education, so that we're able to support more learners with disabilities with equipment and infrastructure for schools, so they're able to offer training even when those ones are at home. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. You have 1 minute, and I could ask you, as schools reopen, where do you see the children and learners with special needs, and what should we do?
One is that I think we need to beef up our support so that the children learners are able to access education. As we all know, they like to face a lot of challenges, including the available equipment that can be able to support them, and more importantly, supporting the teachers, so that we are able to equip them with the necessary skills that can be able to enable them be effective teachers to this category of learners.
Thank you so much, Francis, for taking that time and raising up issues on how partnerships, especially, are so critical in covering the many gaps that we have. I'm glad now to welcome Sylvia as our last panelist to bring now the caregiver, a parent point of view, and looking especially at the support that these learners need now, psychosocial support, but also other aspects to ensure that their learning and the exclusions that exist don't continue to persist. So I wish now to hand over to you, Sylvia. You have about 8 minutes to walk us through your perspectives and end up also with recommendations on how learning through COVID could be enhanced for the learners with special needs. Karibu, Sylvia.
Thank you very much, John, for the opportunity. It feels very inclusive when at least there is the voice of the ones who are 24/7 most with the children and have a bit of an insight. Please allow me first to make a correction on my introduction. Andy Speaks for Special Needs Persons has no association with Andy Action Network. We are two different organizations. And I appreciate that. Thank you. So when we look at COVID-19 and the effects that it has for us as families, as caregivers, and general neurodiverse community plus other disabilities, I will focus more on the neurodiverse because that is what I represent as a mother of 3 boys, 2 of them being on the autism spectrum, and having been in this challenging turbulent times for the past 6 months, what we experienced. First of all, COVID-19 came without much of a warning and the school closures were abrupt. And when you look at the special needs children, you find that there is a way they function. They thrive on routine, and this very abrupt change to their system and their routine was more of a shock and had more adverse effects as other children. For I believe typical children could understand what is going on and quickly adapt to that. Even when we're raising them, we always know you have to start preparing them mentally for them to be able to adopt because of that attachment and thriving in change. We have also communication. As easy as it is to talk to a typical child and explain this is what is going on, that is why you're not going, that's why we are reducing contact, going out, and you have to stay indoors. That is one thing that to date has been very hard, looking at how do we explain to a child whose cognitive is a challenge, whose correlation of something they cannot see and touch, because that's how most special needs children learn. They learn through tactile, they learn through sound, music. So it's a bit different way of communicating to them. And when we're trying to elaborate what this COVID-19 is and the side effects, why they cannot go outside, why they cannot relate, and why they cannot go to school, see their friends, and why all of a sudden we are trying to force mommy to become the teacher and to become our therapist, that was one of the things that threw them actually into a state of confusion. There was a lot of withdrawn support in that the children thrive in the space where we have a support system. Apart from you as a parent, you're doing the loving mommy duty, we have the various therapists that we have, that's the occupational therapist, speech therapist, we have our neurologists who see the children, and all these other support teams that we have. Then all of a sudden, all of this is withdrawn, and you find the children are depending on, this is mom, all of a sudden mom is trying to play teacher, mom is trying to play therapist, because you're trying to do everything to just try and keep them calm. Why am I focusing on this? This is because you find that special children require all this support system to keep them in check. If they get their therapy, that means their sensory integration is aligned. That means they can sit, they can be still, they can pay attention. So you can imagine a child with ADHD being locked up in a house like the whole day. Then you're trying to tell them, this is the house, but I need you to sit here and study. I need you to sit here and I try and do therapy. First of all, for us as caregivers, you find we are challenged in that on top of all the other responsibilities that we have, we're being forced to now start homeschooling. Homeschooling takes a lot. I am a graphic designer, brand consultant. In no way am I a therapist, in no way am I a teacher, and I can never try to be because it's not something that you find that we are good at. And we do not even have the skills to be able to handle some of these things. You can imagine a cerebral palsy parent trying to do therapy at home. And the pressure points, the minute you touch the wrong nerve, the wrong pressure, you can either break that child or cause more damage. So you find we had so many things we are trying to juggle. We need assistive devices that normally are in school. At home, I don't have it. I don't have that gadget. Maybe I cannot afford. There is a parent who cannot even afford data to just use YouTube. When the ministry came out first, the first people who got the support was typical children. You can go on radio, you can go on TV. What about our children? They're always the last to be thought about. And that is one of the things that I think we need to improve. Like, let us, when we're coming up with solutions, we focus on the start, everyone, all inclusive. You find like the challenges now, when we started now on the online studies, an autistic child can focus on one thing at a time. We have this screen, which I'm seeing one person, another person next, another person, and these are people I'm used to seeing face to face, let's say in a classroom setup. And now they are all all over, and you're trying to tell them to pay attention. That change in lights and all that, for a child who is epileptic, you will find it is a trigger. So now we have that dilemma of deciding, okay, what do I focus on? Do I choose to take care of this child this way? Do I choose to buy gadgets? Remember, we've lost work. Most of special needs parents also, you find we have a very high number who are single parents. So if you put even the economic weight that came to us as caregivers, it ended up being learning was the least of our priorities, because you're focusing on food, you're focusing on medication, because a good number of our children depend on medication, especially anticonvulsants and also supplements to just stay healthy and fit. And then now comes the gadgets. You have to think about getting gadgets when you don't even know when your next meal is coming from. People were laid off from work. So you find all this becomes too much of a burden for our parents to even start about thinking about it, and even just trying to balance. And when we are seeking the support system, like when the government was rolling out, the Ministry of Interior, the support, National Council was rolling out the support, you find there's the challenges of the, what COVID has done. It has just amplified the gaps that we have in our policy systems. Because you will find that for us as caregivers, our children do not benefit in the neurodiverse side when as much as you look at the physical disabilities side of it, because it is easier for them, it is visible, and it's something you can see, oh, I need this. They can speak for themselves. Our children are mostly non-verbal, so you will find there is no voice to amplify, and that's how we are now coming out as parents and trying to see, hey, we exist, we are here. Yes, we could be so bogged down trying to just fill in the gaps and give the best that we can for our children, but can we try and just have a look at when we are going through all these challenges, that there is this other group of people, even if we are all under special education, there is an extra support system that is required. At the same time, when we look at the assistive devices, you will find that we do not have them. We do not have them. Most of them are very expensive. If we look at, if we apply for that in National Council, we are forced to have to justify a gazillion of times. We have to have our children assessed by a panel of 3 to 4 doctors, where if it's someone with a physical disability, they'll just show up. And it's easy. So we find that our lives as caregivers and the neurodiverse community, our challenges are like double amplified, and we have to work extra harder. And why you find that maybe we've not been very vocal, because it can get so tiresome that it becomes, let me just do what I can do. So when we come to looking at the system and the setup that we have in the education system, a bit of the recommendations that we would look at, and because we're looking at even when decisions are being made, when decisions about opening schools were being made, was there any caregiver, any parent who was consulted, were therapists consulted? Because I'm trying to imagine, we're talking about social distancing to a hyper child who's just gone back to school, and you're telling them, no, you cannot touch, sit there, do that. It's almost a mission impossible. So we are not aware of how that is being worked around, of how our children are going to be integrated back to school. And when we're talking about integration, are we talking about just generally special schools? Okay, you're here together, but are we looking at the detail? Are we being equity oriented in terms of, look at my child for their needs. This is an autistic child. This is how they learn. This is what they need. Give them that. This is a child with Down syndrome. Give them that. That is a child with mental, who requires more of mental support, and this is what they need. But you find in our classroom setups, from the, when I'm doing my neurodigest show, I go around and I've seen, all we have is all our children clustered in one class. What are our teacher-students ratio? Are we actually being beneficial to our children? These are the things that when we go back, we need to relook and see, are we being just to our special needs children? When we're giving that teacher-student ratio of 1:20 plus, when the international recommendation is a certain one, those are the things that we need to look at and try and see the best way we can go around it. And also there is information of assessment. We need
tunauliza maswali ya kutihani watoto. Hawa watoto wanatihaniwa na nani? Ni nani?
I've handled this for so long. Qualified diagnosis, because we are having children who are suffering, being placed in the wrong place because there is no correct or justified person who's going to give that caregiver that support. The minute we get to school going and you finish the early learning, what are the transition plans? How many secondary schools do we even have for our special needs children? They never change just because their age changes or transits. they still remain special needs children and persons requiring that support. Our TVET centers, we need to look at our children and focus on their abilities and mold them, because I believe all of them have that special gift of what they can be good at. Just that if we change our focus and just decide to empower them to the level that they can also be independent and be a workforce that this country needs to support the rest of the economic sector. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sylvia. Because of you being a parent, I added you an extra minute, and because of your passion. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are back now to engage on these very heavy and weighty issues. I see people have really been active on the Q&A. And to be fair, I think we'll begin from there. And I'll request you, Hagar, to kindly also agree now to sit at the front with the three panelists to be able to lead this conversation and discussion. So that we hear more voices, you will allow me to ask you to, when I mention your name, to unmute and just ask questions. There are three questions that I felt Hagar could respond to. The first by Dr. Sheila Wamahiu, the second by Joanne Mushiri, and the third by Francis Njuguna. So Sheila, please unmute. In case you have any issues of connections, I'm on standby to read your question. But over to you, Sheila, if you can just ask. As Sheila comes on, Joanne, are you ready to ask your question? And Francis also, Njuguna, be ready. So the
John,
question
I think they will need to be admitted as panelists, John.
Fine,
for them to be able to ask. So you might have to read their questions.
I agree. Okay, thank you. So Sheila asks Hagar, first, you mentioned that the sector policy launched in 2018 allows for the learners with disabilities to join institutions near them, provided the support services are friendly and available. My question is, what proportion of basic education institutions actually meet the criteria? And what happens to the learners if there are no disability-friendly institutions near their homes that they can join? So for your benefit, Hagar, I'll go question by question. Do you wish to respond to that one?
Yeah. Thank you, John. And thank you for that question, Sheila. The ministry understands inclusive education as a journey process. And definitely with the policy that has been mentioned, we embarked on that journey. As we speak today, we have more than 3,000 schools in the country that have facilities and are able to support learners with disability. Obviously, that's just about 10% of all the institutions that we have at the basic education level. But considering that we perceive this as a journey, we are going step by step. And sometimes, by the way, we've had very good initiatives by parents where a parent strongly feels that his or her child should go to the school next door. And since that school does not have the requisite facilities or personnel, the parent works closely with the school and with them are there. So I think the short answer is we have made some progress as a ministry, but we still have a long way to go because the ultimate aim and objective is to ensure that all schools in this country are accessible and are able to accommodate learners with. Thank you, John.
I am not sure if John is still on the line, but maybe I can step in and ask Mr. Hagar. The second question is from Joanne. In line with what Mr. Haga has mentioned, is it possible for the government to reconsider the provision of caregivers that were withdrawn some time back? There are learners who have a high degree of challenges and need assistance in various ADLS, for example, bathing, feeding, washing, movement, etc. Bwana Haga, back to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ruto, and thank you for the question. The ministry actually provides some resources, albeit limited, mainly to special schools, so that they are able to hire and support non-teaching staff who can provide the kind of service that has been described. This is in recognition that for a child with a disability or with the special needs to be able to stay in school and learn, much more is required beyond the teacher. And the caregivers, for instance, are very critical. So that service, to the best of my knowledge, has not been withdrawn. It is still there because the ministry still disburses grants to these schools, and it is meant to support these workers who play a very critical role in the schools. You'll find in some quarters they are called auxiliary staff, others call them learning support assistants. Their role is very critical and recognized by them. Sorry, is the moderator back?
John, are you back?
Okay,
do you want to continue?
Haga, for responding to those two questions. I'll ask that you take a sip of water. We now turn to Francis. Francis, we have a question from Dorcas. Sorry, as Haga takes a sip of water, we will move on to you, Francis. There's a question from Dorcas, who works with African storybooks, and is asking about, you talked about partnerships and what partnerships could be available already for connecting with a person like Dorcas, an African storybook, to help learners with disabilities tell their stories through the COVID experience when they go back as part of therapy. And we have had Sylvia articulate those children with a neurodifferential disabilities. So any thoughts, Francis, on how partnerships over this COVID time?
Thank
Francis?
you. I think partnership, can you hear me? Partnership can be formed at two levels. One, we can enter into some form of what I call formal partnership, in which we have some mutual agreement, formal agreement, clearly specifying the rules of engagement between the partnership, and we're able to support that through that. But then we also have some, what I would call informal partnership, where we don't need to enter into some kind of formal agreement, but we are able to support specific groups. I have a case of there's a writer who came to my office one day, and he had written a book explaining how the challenges that a parent with a child with disability faces, and he wanted us to help her in marketing the book. What we did as a council, we were able to purchase a number of copies from her, and we were able to distribute them to our offices, and some of them we were able to distribute to some institutions. I think through this kind of partnership, we're able to disseminate or to share experiences that the parents of such children are facing. In terms of supporting, you know, for that kind of a storybook, then the best thing would be if the person can be able to come to office, we're able to see and agree on how we can be able to support that kind of support, that kind of a partnership. Hello, have I been able to answer the question adequately?
Thanks, Francis. And there's Stephen Jalenga who was impressed by what... Yes, you have. Stephen Jalenga was very impressed by what the council is doing and was asking, how do you ensure that this information reaches all the children and everywhere?
We are trying. I can't say we have reached all the children or all the potential people we want to target, but we use a number of methods to disseminate our information. One, we have a website where we post all the information in terms of what the council does, and also in terms of any events and activities that are coming up on disability issues, we're able to post them on our website. Secondly, we have our officers in every county, and part of their work is to be able to disseminate information on disability issues, and more importantly, on what the council or services offered by the council. The other way that we do this is that we support groups of the, as I mentioned in my remarks, we have a program that we support advocacy groups, and part of that, we're able to ensure that they're able to disseminate information on disability and the rights of disabilities, and more importantly, on how persons can be able to access the services of the council. And the other thing that I want to mention is that in every county, we have formed what we call vetting committees, so that any service that somebody needs at the county level, it is subjected to a vetting committee, which comprises various organizations for disabilities, the local administration, and our officer. And those are also avenues for disseminating information on what the council is doing.
Thank you. I don't know, can I be heard, Sarah?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And so sorry for my internet is not behaving well. Let's allow Hagar and Francis to take to breathe. And Lydia, you could come in. There was a question from Augusta on you didn't mention anything to do with the deaf blind and also autistic learners. Did your study establish anything around these disabilities?
Thank you, Dr. Yes, the study covered deaf, blind, and autism. I'm very sure that we reached out to people like Sylvia and other parents. And actually, it is only when we reached out to children with neurodevelopmental disabilities that a group of partners came together under Action for Children with Disability, ACD, led by their chairman, Dennis Mogi and Ivan Aptuni, and they were able to work around with KICD, and they launched some programs for children with different disabilities. And I'm sure that there are programs that are still running for these particular disabilities. For children who are deaf-blind, yes, we reached out to children who are deaf-blind. And considering that children who are deaf-blind learn through tactile, the complication was especially training the children how to not to touch, will even sniff, not to sniff people. And the hardest was how to wear a mask. And we did even discuss with the teachers. And Dr. allow me to say this, that some of the teachers who reached out to children, and that is why I said pre-primary were more. Some of these teachers actually took a risk and went to the community because of addressing children who are deaf-blind. So they were reached out, and maybe that is why we are recommending a continued development of ICT infrastructure for children who do homeschooling, especially children with autism and children who are deaf-blind.
There's a question, Lydia, on how could one access this report that you've alluded to?
We shall be launching this report, I believe, in a month's time. The report is ready. We are just waiting to be given the okay to roll it out, and we shall have it on the KICD website. I believe in a span of the next 30 days, we shall have it on the KICD website, and you can access it through www.kicd.ac.ke. You go under resources, you'll find research work, and there are many reports there, the ones that I have quoted. So this report will be one of the reports that will be available on that website. Dr. over to you.
It looks like John's email is not working. So maybe I will come in, and this is to Lydia again. What is the experience of learners with special needs during emergencies like the case of COVID-19 by gender? Is the learning experience same for both gender?
The learning experience was, we were not very clear on gender, but what came from the field is that most of the children with a disability were engaged in more of the household chores. And therefore, it means that the girls did more of life skill and household chores, while the boys were left unattended. And actually, some of the children we found wandering on the street were the boy child. And therefore, definitely there was a gender play to it, but our study was not very, did not purpose to do a gender disaggregated kind of a reporting.
Thank you. How many special needs education teachers are supposed to be posted to the integrated primary school or those with special units? And what is the Directorate of Special Needs Education at Ministry of Education doing to remedy this? Bwana Haga, this is a question to you from Francis Juguna.
Thank you, Dr. Ruto, for that question. I think we all agree that the teaching force or resource is a critical one if any learning has to take place. And in the integrated programs, special units, or even schools that aspire to be completely inclusive, the Teacher Service Commission works with the curriculum-based establishment to deploy adequate teaching force into the school. However, this question becomes very significant considering that some of the teachers who have been deployed to these schools may not have any background training in special needs. So we don't see that teacher with special needs as a must to be in the classroom to teach a class that has a learner with a disability. We see him or her as a resource who can support different levels, and therefore you may not necessarily need different teachers in all the classrooms, teachers with this kind of training to adequately support the school. So most of the time you'll find that in the integrated programs, or even in some of the schools that have included learners with disabilities, there's probably just a teacher who has that kind of background, that kind of training. And that teacher, should he or she come across a situation able to liaise with his or her colleagues, either in neighboring schools or in assessment centers, to figure out how best the learner can be supported. So we really don't have a ratio or a calculation to say that X number of teachers are required for this kind of school. We have that for special schools, but for integrated or inclusive schools, we see the role of this teacher as being as facilitative. We may not need to have many teachers in the school.
John, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. Maybe Sylvia, you have taken some rest a little bit. How are you engaging with this, especially the aspect of EACs and assessment of children? In your view, what could be the role of parents in supporting the systems and structures that government has put in place, or what generally could parents do at this time as the schools are reopening?
Thank you for that. When you look at the entire setup and the system of raising a special needs child, I think from my research that I did for the US and the UK, why they thrive and why you find they have better development and better engagement and education, and their children exceeding and going up to university and performing like any other typical child, is the synergy that there is in the system and policies. Policies put in place are adhered to. I think for us as a country, we have policies, but then we don't have the person who's checking. For us as caregivers, from where we stand, if I look at, I have to run today to this therapist, tomorrow I'm running to another therapist, and then the other day I'm running. These different support systems are supposed to be put in synergy in that it's being done together. Well, I'll give you an example for in Britain. At the end of the term, when the IEP is being done, in attendance is the social worker, is the head teacher, the class teacher, the occupational therapist, the speech therapist. So you find that this becomes teamwork, plus the parents, both parents without excuses. And it is set out, and it's a very long session where we all go through what the child has achieved, not achieved, what you do at home. So you find that the parent is being your support system on this time. Like when schools closed, yes, it is a break, but there are those nitty-gritty things for me as a caregiver, I'll be able to continue with at home. Now, for example, in this COVID system, if that had been the case, I would very well know this is where we were at. This is what we were planning. But you find that in our government right now and in our system, yes, the policy states that we're supposed to be having individualized education plans, but is that what is actually on the ground? For us as caregivers, we are there ready to support, and we will feel even better. You know, it is encouraging when you know I have a support system, opposed to feeling like you're running this journey alone. You're the one trying to chase everyone with all the shortage from the neurologist, the therapist. You find we are sharing so many. And one of the other recommendations I think I forgot to mention, how about we have the therapist being supplied in school? That is, we have the same way you have English class. Why can we not have the therapy centers at school? In that, you know, the child goes at a specific time, or if it's group sessions, but it is in school, it's part of what you're doing. Because if I cannot afford it as a parent, you find my child will not perform at optimum because it's not my fault. Disability is expensive. It's not expensive because you're poor, but it is what makes you expensive as a care. I mean, it makes your life harder as a parent, and that's why you find people saying that PWDs are in poverty because of how to just life and all the expenses and all the fights that you have to fight just to fit in. So if we all come together, us as caregivers, we're all ready to support, but give us a seat at the table so that we can also advise when you're making the decision that this support me and we get the best out of everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Let me bring in another special participant here, CTNA. I don't know whether we'll be able to hear you. The issue of IEP has come up, and how do we cover the learning loss of learners with special needs when they are educator? What are you planning, or what is on the ground to help these learners cover up? Especially getting to understand that examinations will be coming for the terminal classes. Is there anything you'd want to share, even your own perspectives, CTNA?
His mic is muted if he wants to speak, or if he's trying to speak, sorry.
I think you can get me now.
Yes.
Yes, we can get you. Go ahead.
My contribution is that I'm very happy about what has gone on. And in fact, the panelists, John Mugo, Lydia Chege, Francis Anyenda, and Sylvia Mora, have just read my thoughts. Now to say, actually the children who are maybe with disabilities have been having problems, especially when they are at home. Actually, Sylvia and Lydia said everything about the children who are now at home, because when we talk about the education which was offered by KICD and of course the online and so on, this group missed. And I want to say so because we are really disadvantaged in a way because of the disability. Because even the education for the children with disabilities is very expensive. It's very expensive in that all these children, most of them must be in a boarding school. Not because of their liking, but because the schools handling, or rather the specialists handling these children are not scattered everywhere. There are only maybe a few so that they are grouped in a place to form a school, and then these children are made to be boarders. So my request, or rather my thought is that we need, as a matter of fact, to fast track the teacher-pupil ratio so that these children can be reached. Also, the grants for the children with disabilities, just like Director Aka said, I've been lucky to have taught in a school whereby we had a primary school and a secondary school. The secondary school get 22,000 from the government, while the primary school get 11,000. Yet the same children are in the same school, sharing the same dormitory, sharing the same meals, and so on. And yet the secondary school will go ahead and get the 22,000. So you realize that the primary school have a lot of maybe impediment when it comes to getting the education. And my prayer is that for us to get a real education, or rather for these children to get education, and this one has been agreed all over, is that 57,000 is enough to educate a child in a boarding school. And if 57,000 is enough, then that means we need to have the grants maybe increased and assistive devices be availed in schools. And of course, the same assistive devices be availed for these children when they are at home. Because most of them, the other day when they were at home, they did not reach the education which was being given by all these sectors. So it's my prayer that all these children come to school, because it's very important they come to school, because when they are in school, they get therapies and so on. No? I don't know. They get their therapies, like, for example, the neurologists, the assistive devices, and that and so on. So it is actually a challenge to the government and everybody, all of us, that we consider the assistance to these children, because it's very important. These are just children, because when they grow up, they'll have all the problems if they don't get education. So it has been my prayer that these children be considered for the grants being adjusted upwards, for the teacher-pupil ratio being seen. Because what I know about deaf-blind children, it is 1-to-1. What I know about the hearing impaired children, it is 12 to 1 plus 1, meaning the other teacher becomes an assistant to the other teacher who is teaching. And so, of course, there is, Mr. Aga, I know, is aware of all this. So let us try a lacuna in education.
Okay, thank you, Peter, for you coming in. We have 5 minutes now to really start coming close to what we are saying as a forum. And key issues have been raised on starting with the protocols that are now being applied. Can this really work for all children? And I don't know, Haga, whether has anything been done to adapt these protocols to suit some of these special needs we are talking about, issues of mask, issues of distancing and so on. The second question which any panelist could come in is around the reopening. We have opened for examination classes mainly, but we know that that examination is not the only thing important for children. How about those in vocational channels? And what are we saying? Should we prioritize reopening for children with special needs? And how could this happen? And the third issue that I want to start tying together is the whole issue around funding and resources. There are aspects coming up. I don't know whether we have anyone from TSC here, but teachers.
Has John gone quiet?
John.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I cannot read his thoughts, but let us assume that the last question was on teachers, and maybe the panelists can start responding to the 3 questions he had asked. Over to Bwana and to the others as well.
Thank you. I will attempt to talk to a few questions that the moderator has raised, and that ones that had also come from the participants. I think in terms of giving priority to examination classes, we have to accept is that the ministry adopted a phased opening of schools. This is because it gives us the opportunity also to have a look at how the learners are settling in the considering the spaces that are available. The issue of learners, especially with following the stage-based curriculum, was considered, but it was felt that since their curriculum is not tied to specific time limits, we might have the opportunity of learning from the other situations before we bring them on board. So that's why it was just limited to the particular cohorts. We hope that by the time the Cabinet Secretary pronounces himself on the admission of the other cohorts, we will have seen and observed and will be able to guide appropriately considering what resources that the moderator went off when he was talking about resources. I know he specifically mentioned issues of teachers, but I want to address myself to the issue of the financial and material resources that are usually provided by the Ministry of Education to the schools. And I am the first one to accept and admit that schools would require more resources than what we are providing. I think Mr. Sietene gave a very good illustration of the difference of how secondary schools are funded vis-a-vis primary schools. And the funding that we really should be talking about is for reasonable accommodation, and especially the kind of funding that will help us get more support or auxiliary staff so that they can support the learners in the school. The ministry is working on this because we also do appreciate the fact that all this is happening within a specific socio-economic context. Sometimes resources is a big we may be able to reach an agreement with the treasury through the planning system. I don't know when that's going to happen, so I can't give a date, to make sure that schools are well resourced so that they are able to cater specifically for the needs of learners and not disadvantage them or their families. Thank you, Dr. Ruth. I think at the time being, I could stop there.
Fred, sorry, many questions are directed to you, but perhaps let me ask this one. Director Fred, yes. What is being done to reach children with disabilities in rural areas to ensure they get quality education, especially at this time of COVID?
A big reference to the earlier contribution by our panelists of the options of remote learning that the ministry and its agencies adopted. But I also acknowledge the fact that we know, and the KICD study has proved that we were not reaching all children. And the reason why we are not reaching all these children has been given. In fact, even Sylvia has talked about some of the issues, and Lydia in her presentation. So for the time being, we are trying to ensure that other support services that are doable at this particular point be done. We are soon reopening the assessment centers, which provide very vital support at community level. But, and I think this responds to one of the other questions that had been raised. When these children go back to school, you may have heard the cabinet secretary himself clearly state that he acknowledges that not all children have been learning from home. And therefore, when these children go back to school, they will be accorded the opportunity to start learning from where they stopped. And of course, teachers are trained, and they may not necessarily start from that point. They may even recap on some of the areas that have been covered, so that there's no serious learning loss, and that it can be joined even as the kids move ahead and learn. However, in the long run, and this is a good recommendation that also came from this discussion, we need to rethink how we give the children the devices. Devices should be tied to children and not schools, so that should a situation like this arise, the children are still able to continue with their education. Because if you look at the cloud, the KI cloud, you find some very accessible resources that have been uploaded. Only challenge is that the children may not have the devices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ruta, I would like to have a little input on that.
Unfortunately, I just have 1 minute to time, so I will give you a parting shot as I'm concluding, because and I'll ask the participants if they can just allow me 2 more minutes. But let me just ask this question to Sylvia, please. Okay. Sylvia, you had said that special needs children are special needs forever, or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. Could you please link their developmental outcomes in terms of the acquisition of their skills, knowledge, to labor market opportunities, economic opportunities, please, as you're giving your parting shot in 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. I will start that from how we look at our systems. When a child is young and you just realize that they are a special child, and what opportunities, what guidance do you get? Absolutely almost nil. So it is for you as a caregiver to discover what they're good at, work through and get them to schools. And like I'd mentioned, if you go to our schools, there is no inspection that actually learning is going on, and that clustering. So you'll find where we are having our gaps is that as a parent, when I see I've been paying school fees, I've been taking my child, and it's like taking a child to a daycare, and there is no progress and actual acquisition of skills and talent being nurtured, you find we might be able to give up ability with proper support and does not give up on their child. We find our children going to school, going to high school. I'll give you an example of someone like Kamunyu. Kamunyu is a child with CP. He's now an adult. He's gone to campus. He graduated. He just got a master's last month. He works at CCK in a senior position. If the mother had given up and if you listen to his story, you'll find he was rejected and he had to use a very long route to be admitted in a higher institution of learning. But you see, it took that persistence and never giving up of both him and believing in himself and the parents for him to be where he is right now. I'll give you another one, that is Marie and Jerry. Same thing. It's that parent who continues and the opportunities, but the problem in or what is similar in all their stories is there are no institutions that have open doors and resources that will actually just embrace them as they are. Every time, yes, you qualify, but then you have to have, at that point is when you have to be squeezed in. You want to take this career path, but everyone, most of the institution look at it like, I don't think you can hack it, or we cannot accommodate your slow learning. So if we have our institutions very ready and set up, the same way we're talking about having special classes in primary schools. I am yet to hear of a secondary school that has a special unit, because I know I saw it when growing up, but in high school, I never heard of one. Look again at TVET. How many do we have that opening that, yes, an autistic person, you teach them this is how you do something, electricals, they will do it exactly the same way, and they're perfectionists. That means we have a labor market that is very skilled that we are taking to waste. All we need to do is teach them, repeat, and they take it in. And that is a skill we are letting go of because we are not considering it looking at our setup of institutions.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding us of that. Lydia, your final remarks, please, as you come in with a comment you wanted. In 10 seconds, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ruto. I just wanted to say that somebody had asked whether who are the children who are most affected. The most affected children were children in informal settlements, children in arid areas, and children in the rural areas, because that is where disability, most children with disabilities are from those particular areas. And they have to think about livelihood first. My parting shot is, I would wish that special schools opened, and I wish they opened yesterday, so that the conversation for COVID-related response is taking place now, so that it will not be a conversation that will begin after everybody else has reopened school and settled. Special schools need to open. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well stated, well received. Francis, your parting shot, please. I do not know if we have Francis here.
Francis is not here.
Or Francis may have gone off today. Internet has been. Fred, your parting shot, please. Please unmute. Yes, please, go on.
Can you hear me, Dr. now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think my parting shot is that we always need to remember that the children we've talked about are part of the society. And whatever it is that we are doing within our different roles and mandates, we have to include them in that discussion. Only then will we be able to come up with interventions that are completely inclusive so that we don't have to talk about them separately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I wonder if I could have a parting shot directed at KICD, with the permission of your chair, Mugo, who is having worse internet challenges than me. And he says that perhaps KICD could prepare a module for all special needs teachers on reopening. That would be a nice, quick thing that one can do. Panelists, thank you very much. This has been a lovely discussion. We were not able to respond to all the questions, conversations, comments, but thank you all for the people who have stayed on, and it is even 5 minutes after the hour. And Bwana Fred Haga, thank you too for hosting this series of the policy dialogues. I think it is really important we keep on talking about this. The message on schools reopening, CTNA and I were in the COVID committee, so I think that has been hard tomorrow as we are rethinking what to do. The next policy dialogue will possibly be in a month. We will try to communicate to you ahead of time. Many people have said we need to focus on children in arid areas, children with various layers of vulnerabilities. Perhaps that will be the focus as we are looking for another department that is going to host this, as Bwana Haga hosted this. Many thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation, for your patience, and let's make a date again next month. Asanteni.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.